Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of What is in Our Stand Today. I'm working alone, so please excuse the, maybe some rough chops between scenes, or maybe I'll just leave the camera where it is. The channel is growing quite nicely, and I appreciate everyone who has subscribed to the channel. So please, if you haven't subscribed and you like the content that you see, I'm going to steal something from Wayno's photos. Don't be a ninja watcher. Please subscribe. And then, of course, like and share with your friends. So today what we're going to do is we have a crankset that is a 5236. So that means the large chain ring is 52. The inner chain ring is 36. Now this is most commonly called a mid-compact crankset. On one end of the spectrum is the standard crankset, so 5339. So 53 big chain ring, 39 inner chain ring. So 5339. And then on this end, and we're talking standard road, there's a lot of other permutations for gravel and stuff. You have 5034. So 5339, big chain ring and big chain rings, and then 5034. But right in the middle, they wanted to find a crankset that was, well, okay, if it's only one tooth less than the large chain ring on the 5339, and maybe 3 teeth less than the 5339, so now it's a 36, so 5236, then it's kind of in the middle, right? So it's a little bit bigger by 2 on your big chain ring from a 50 to a 52, and the inner from a 34 to a 36. So they're trying to split the difference. Now, some people don't need a lot of help with climbing, so they don't need the 5034. And some people don't want the large chain ring of a 53 because they never go that fast that they need a 5311 combination, 11 being the smallest cog in the back. So that 5236 seemed to be a nice middle type of chainring combination. So for this particular customer, we have, it's actually a Ritchie. We have a Ritchie with a 5339. Then we have another bike that has now been relegated to trainer duty, and that's a 5034. So when we built this bike, we built it with a mid-compact. Well, she's had the bike, I think, 3 years now, and has had this 5236 on this bike. But, she's barely 120 pounds. And when she's riding with groups, her weight is one of the limiting factors to help her keep up with people on descents. And she's just really strong, so she really doesn't need a 36 inner chainring. She can climb in her 39 inner on her Ritchie, and a 28 cassette in the back. So the 28 being the largest cog in the back. So after several discussions, we realized, well, we really don't need this 5236 anymore. Not to mention that the next couple of races on her calendar, so Logan to Jackson, a race I've always wanted to do, is in September, and it's only got like 10,000 feet over 200 miles, 10,000 feet of climbing. So you're going to be moving along, and if you're in a pack, you need big chain rings to stay with people. So what we're going to do today is just replace those chain rings. Now, it's a long lead in. Maybe I'll start doing chapter timestamps, but you know what? If you come to my channel, you should understand that I'm going to give you the how and the why before I show you the what. It's just the way my channel is set up and the way I wish it to be is that you're visiting with me and we're having a discussion before we actually get into the work. There are people that are in a hurry and all they need is, they skip, and all they need is the service. But that's not really much. I mean, it's just changing a couple of bolts or loosening and tightening a couple of bolts and replacing chain rings. So I will do that, of course. But just know that the how and the why is way more important than the what. Okay, so what I did before shooting the video is I removed the crankset, okay? And to remove the crankset on a Shimano crankset, you need a 5mm Allen head to remove the 2 bolts. And there's a little safety catch here. And there's also this preload button bolt. It's plastic, so there's not much torque you're going to put on this, 1 to 2 Newton meters. And this is a TL FC16. So other people make these. You don't have to actually use the Shimano one. Okay, so what we're going to do now is this is a Torx T30. Torx. Oh, and this one is green, but you might notice all the rest of these are black. And we're going to get to that here in a minute because people torque these things down way too much. And I've had these shear off, the head shear off, before I get to the torque value. And the torque value is 12 to 16 Newton meters. So generally I slow down right around 12 Newton meters, and that's normally enough. But this is controversial, and I know, but I grease these chainring bolts because I've had creaky chain rings or cranksets, and it ended up being the chainring bolts. Also, like I said, these heads will shear off. So now we get back to why this one is green. I actually broke one of these wrenches trying to get these chainring bolts off. So, good on Park Tool, they replaced this. They have a lifetime warranty, so they replaced it. But now it's green and everything else is black. But you know what? This helps because every time I need to take the chain rings off, I know that this one's a T30. All right, so what we're going to do is finish removing these bolts. Now, the most important thing for you is to set up your work area so that you don't put anything in backwards. Believe it or not, the inside chainring, I have seen on multiple occasions, the chainring's been put in backwards. Now, let's talk about one more thing which may also be controversial. This is a Dura-Ace crankset. And by the way, at any moment now, the AC might kick on. This is a Dura-Ace crankset, so R9100. So we have the big chain ring from the R9100 series, and there it is, right? But the inner chain ring, we can't get for another few months. And as I mentioned, this customer has a few races. So there's one that we're doing this weekend up in Big Bear, 100 miler with like 9,000 feet. Then she's got a 500 3-day event coming up at the end of August. And then September is that other one that I said, the 200 miler loader job. So we're going to use a Dura-Ace big chain ring, outer chain ring, which to me is the most important of the 2 chain rings to make sure it's Dura-Ace, because the machining and the profiling is important. Now, on the inner chain ring, we're going to use an R8000. And that's really just because we can't get the Ultegra one for a little bit of time. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. For those of you who are completely OCD and everything's got to be this and everything's got to be that, listen, Shimano thought about you to help save yourself or save you from yourself. All these parts are interchangeable. They're all compatible with each other. So don't obsess about, oh, I have to have Dura-Ace for this. No. If it's all in that same series of stuff, so the 9100, and even the 9000. Some of those things are compatible. The 8000, the R9100, and the 7000 series from 105. All of that is compatible. Do not obsess about, I have to have this, I have to have that. You don't. Okay? So, I'm sorry. Sometimes I do sound like I'm castigating you, but you just have to realize how inane some of these habits are. They're just, it's not necessary. All you need to do is get things that are within the same group level series type of thing, and they're all compatible. You can run a rear derailleur and a front derailleur and shifters from Ultegra, Dura-Ace, and 105, all three being different, and it'll function perfectly because that's the way Shimano designed it. Okay, so let's get back to the job at hand. Now, what you want to do is when you have your chain rings, you set up your workbench the same exact way as your crankset is set up. So the crank arm, what you'll notice is on your chain rings, you will have a spot that is exactly the same place that it's supposed to be. So that Dura-Ace labeling is just opposite of the crank arm. Okay, so you just flip that like that and you have it ready to go. And then on this guy, the inner chain ring, you're going to have your different types of shaping here. But what you want to do is just ensure, because there's a little arrow, and it should be, actually it's not an arrow, it's this little notch here. So what you're looking for is this little notch. And that little notch will be, if the crank arm is right by your belly, that's where that notch is going to go. Okay, so let's get this going. First thing, we take the inner chain ring off. Now, this guy is almost always seized on there. Take that guy off. And okay, so remember, here is your Dura-Ace branding, and here is your Dura-Ace branding. So those two should be opposite of each other. Okay, and then you pop on your inner chain ring. And as I mentioned before, what you're looking for, and this probably will be hard to see, but this little notch here, or it's not a notch, it actually sticks out. So that little notch there, I keep calling it a notch, I'm sorry, but that should be right in line with the crank arm. Okay, now you just take your bolts and dab a little bit of grease on them. And once again, this may be controversial and you may not want to do it this way. And please, when you watch my videos, a lot of times these are just for guidance. They're not the gospel. You can choose to do it your own way. You don't have to follow everything to the letter. However, a lot of times I do follow exactly what is spec'd by Shimano, but I do put out disclaimers when I say, hey, this is what I do, and Shimano does not have that. Now, I've never had these bolts back out. So I just, like I said, I use the grease just to make sure that they're not permanently seized in there. And now, 12 Newton meters. Now, you always want to work in a star or a crisscross applesauce pattern. Okay, so we're going to start finger, because that's best practices. The first thing you do is put bolts in, finger tight, You notice I'm not using the ratchet handle. I'm just using the locking of that. Okay, once you've got them all snug, you've noticed that the ramping here inside each one of those arms, it's seated properly, then you can go to town. All right, so remember the torque value was 12 to 16, but we want to bring it up evenly, so we'll start little by little and keep going in a crisscross pattern as much as possible. Okay, there's 12. There's 12. Okay, if it doesn't go right away, just work on the other one. Okay, there, that one snaps in. There it is. Okay, so now, just to make sure that I've torqued them all, I click. And there you go. Okay. Now, what we want to do next is just ensure that everything looks right. Okay. Now, when we go to install the crankset, all we have to do is use this 5mm to torque down the crankset. But first, obviously, I'm sorry. First, you put in the compression plug, 1 to 2 Newton meters. Make sure the crank spins freely, and then torque these 2 bolts down to 12 to 14 Newton meters. If you ever forget, it's usually, yeah, there it is. It's right on the crank arm if you haven't peeled off that label yet. 12 to 14 Newton meters. Okay, that's all for today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you up the road.